Welcome to episode 69 of the Creative Train podcast. This one is called What Could Possibly Go Wrong? And for this auspicious episode number, I put the question out to my social media friends about what topic or topics could be covered in a one-time homage to this event. I got suggestions from folks who've obviously never heard a single episode, to prompts from past guests, and even some more mature music students who I thought might have a laugh at the topic. So I've arrived at the topic of what could possibly go wrong. And in this episode, I'm going to explore a few things with the help of my guests and look at some of the more blue moments we face as artsy personalities, from performers to technicians to educators and even as students. Buckle up, this one might get a bit weird. All aboard. Chicka pow wow. What follows may be a bit off-putting to some folks, but I can guarantee it is all our real lived experience as working artists and educators. I'll ease you in with a few of the weird things I have experienced as an event DJ, from weddings to New Year's Eve gigs to local charity events to one-on-one teaching situations. I've been through a lot of weird things with a lot of people. There are a few stories you might call viral if they weren't so old and actually predate that term. Some might even call them anecdotal, like they might not be true, but everybody seems to tell the story. But this next one is very true, and I can assure you. It was in spring of 1998. I was hired to DJ a wedding at a lovely inn hidden in the forested wilds of Haliburton, Ontario. Several weeks of communication between myself and the bride had set me up with a killer playlist of tunes, ranging from the typical wedding standards like Brown Eyed Girl and Shout, to a varied 80s playlist of alt hits from The Cure to Sisters of Mercy, Smiths, and OMD. I was stoked because this is totally my jam as a DJ. I love the retro stuff. The ceremony was typically 30 minutes late. No biggie, right? Of course. It seems it was late because the bride and groom had gotten into, I would say, more than a bit of a row before the ceremony, and decided the best way that they could deal with this independently was to both hit the bottle early. And I mean, hit the bottle. They were hammered by the time the ceremony came. Both had to be coached through their expected lines by their bridesmaid and best man. And by the end of the ceremony, I think most folks saw the writing on the wall that this might be an early night. By 5:00 p.m., the ceremony had concluded, the bride and groom parties had retreated to their respective cottages, and the mayhem was cued to happen in about an hour. The groom was practically carried into the dining room by his groomsmen. You know, like when you see athletes help a fellow athlete off the field who gets injured, one arm around each guy. So he came in like that. And then the bride, arrived shortly thereafter, clad in only a leatherette or leather looking, or maybe real leather. Let's call it a corset. That's it. Cursing a blue streak at the groom as she stumbled into the room, who most of us assumed she could not even see straight enough to see in this physical reality, like she was not part of this world. Within 15 minutes of this, the end was nigh. The highly inebriated bride was left only in her underpants at this point, hollering for the best man to come do her again, while the groom was actually fast asleep on the floor, just in front of the wonderfully decorated head table. Folks started making their way out. They'd had a few appetizers and drinks at this point, and they offered a smile and a nod of thanks to the newlyweds who had forked out an obvious fortune for this event. And by 6:00, I was mostly packed up and ready to hit the road home for an almost 2-hour drive. So that was kind of nice because I usually wouldn't get home till around 4 a.m. if the event finished at 1. Another story came to me from a fellow event DJ, and this one is a little bit sus because most DJs have heard this story from their fellow DJs. And this is the one I was saying might be a little bit like anecdotal. People just like to tell the story because it's like, ooh, to somebody who hasn't heard it before. So the story goes like this. Just before dinner, the bridal party went scavenging for the bride and the best man. Heavens, they've been AWOL for almost an hour now. Wherever could they be? Well, likely doing the nasty behind the coats in the foyer. Yeah, that one's been used a lot. Various iterations of where they were doing it. Maybe it was a real thing at some point, and it's just like one of those telephone conversations where you pass along the story and it gets changed a little bit with each person that tells it. But it's one of those stories that follows event DJs around. People often will ask me, hey, did you ever come across a bride doing the best man? Me, no. I've been in proximity, like I said in the first story, of that woman telling the best man to come and do her again. But yeah. Another story came from a musician friend of mine who was performing with his band. They were a great band, 5-piece like funk rock band, in a lovely small town just a bit north of here. A lot of sketchy stuff seems to happen up north, eh? Anyway, this fellow was getting hit on hard. He was the front man of the band, singer, lead guitar player, and he was getting hit on big time. From setup to almost the end of the night by a patron who was sure she had finally met her Mr. Right in him. Though only a few cordial, how are you now type of conversations happened, in the early part of the evening, he began to feel a little off-put by the whole thing. And to add some backstory to this at my friend's request, he described it that he and his wife had been in a really rough spot at this point for some time. They were not even hardly on speaking terms. They were very business oriented with one another, even though they still shared the house and had kids. It would have been very easy for a lesser man to fall prey to this person's advances, but he didn't. He said he actually felt yucky about the whole thing. And that night after loadout, he went home to his wife and told her the whole gruesome story. And that moment of honesty really began to patch things up and build a new sense of trust between them. So that's a really great way to end that story. One of the strange things that a lot of folks think about musicians is that we're all like those mid-'80s Motley Crue personalities, you know, the drugs and the fast cars and the women and degenerate behavior, but it's not so. We're not all out cruising for the next easy takedown after our gigs. In fact, most of us just want to go home to our dog, our cat, our couch, or whatever, and wind down gradually over the next few hours until sleep comes. My friend in the last story was tempted, and given the somewhat sour nature of his relationship at that point, he could have gone off into the arms of another, but he didn't, and he's glad he didn't. Next up is a collection of voice recording stories. And Linda has some pretty amazing stories, a little bit gruesome, some of them, and some of them that are actually a little frightening about what it's like being a solo performer or a woman in a band with a room full of drunk people. So Linda, what do you have to say here?
Open mic night at the Coach and Horses. Gerald was sick, so Johnny was hosting, but he wasn't feeling very good. So Jeremy and I were sitting there. There was, we'll say, a young man that was extremely intoxicated and really loving the music. Really loving the music. His hand was in a very low position. His other hand was holding a beer. There used to be a shelf on the wall by where we used to play underneath the dartboards. Well, he was leaning on the shelf. Jeremy and I just kept looking at each other while we were playing. This guy was just yelling and singing along as best as he possibly could. At one point, he decided to put his beer down and pull his hand up from his groin area and start blowing kisses at me. Jeremy burst out laughing and stopped playing in the middle of the song, and I continued and could not look at this guy. Johnny looked up, wondering why Jeremy stopped playing, and I continued the song. Johnny escorted the young man out, and that was the beginning of me starting to blow kisses at Jeremy every time I see him.
So some of that's kind of funny. You can, have a laugh at people being gross in public when they get out of control, have a little bit too much to drink and the inhibitions fall far, far away from them. But the next two stories, I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up, kind of a trigger warning. They're some pretty powerful stories involving sexual harassment and following somebody, tracking them, not letting them out of your sight. I'm really grateful that Linda told these stories because I know they're true. And this is a story about Linda having to go through the same thing. And, it's a hard thing to deal with, any kind of, sexual harassment, because like I said in the intro, a lot of people think musicians are going to be an easy hit, that we're some kind of like degenerate with no moral compass. And we seem to bring that out in people. And it's not just at events where that people have been drinking. There's just this, I don't even know where it comes from, because I am a musician and I know I'm not a degenerate. But there's this general unspoken perception that we're going to be like immoral, that we're just like looking for the next thing to be immoral about. So if you're going to want to skip these next two stories, I'll give you a hint. They total 3 minutes and 45 seconds long in total for both of the segments put together. So I'm going to stop in a second now, give you a few ticks to look at the counter on your player device, whatever you're listening to this on. Give you a few ticks to go ahead, 3 minutes, 45 seconds, so you don't have to experience that. But if you've never experienced anything like that, these are some real world things that we have to deal with as performers in the music industry. So here you go. I'll give you 5 seconds.
Without mentioning any extra names, I was with a friend who was playing at the pub, and there was an elderly lady. Well, at the pub, there is a pole, and it's a beam that is used to hold the roof up. Well, as my buddy was playing, this lady used this beam as a strip pole. And when he was done playing, this elderly lady, she was close to 80, decided that my buddy, who is only 30, was fresh meat and wanted nothing but to take him home. He was completely distraught and did not want to leave the stage, didn't know what to do, and decided that I was his girlfriend for the rest of the night, even though she knew I was married. They always say that you have to be appropriate, you have to watch what you do, watch what you say, and they always condemn the men for not being appropriate, not saying the right things. But let me tell you, women are just as bad. I dress with biker boots, jeans, and a hoodie typically when I play. And I think I might give off the vibe that I'm a lesbian by wearing that, because I seem to attract a lot of lesbians. And one time, Gerald and I were playing. As we were playing, there were two of them that were sitting in front of us all night long and did not give up with the most inappropriate comments. These comments ranged from, we'll just keep this somewhat PG. Every time we were done, they were yelling out, "You're making me wet." Oh, I can't even say certain things because you want to play this on the podcast. Use your imagination, times it by 10. And guys, you're not the only ones. Women are, I'd have to say, 10 times worse.
And the next one goes back to this idea of musicians being an easy hit because we were naturally born immoral or something. In the throes of a performance, we learn to be kind of dismissive of these things. We learn to laugh them off. We can make a show out of it to push the entertainment aspect of what we're doing. But we really don't like it. We don't like it at all. These things happen to women and they happen to men, probably equally. And I don't know what percentage would go one way of women hitting on women and or men hitting on women or vice versa, whatever the ratios would be. It happens all the time. There is no one version that's worse than the other because, guys feel it too. Some people think that, a woman hitting on a guy is just like going to make his day. And, often in this kind of situation, it doesn't. It makes you feel gross.
Being a female in the music world sometimes can be extremely difficult. You get fans that become obsessive quite quickly. They try to help you at the end of the night with packing, loading. You don't necessarily want to take the help because you don't know what their objectives are. You stick with the people that you know and you try to be as safe as possible about all that. There's been times where the guys are helping you, the guys meaning the people that you know, and they make sure they walk you out to your vehicle afterwards and watch you leave. Well, there's been times where these new people show up and they try to help you pack and load, and I've noticed that I've been followed. As I leave the bar parking lot, I see a vehicle follow me. I go down the road and it's 3 or 3:30 in the morning and there's typically nobody around and there's headlights behind me. So then I turn down a different road and these headlights are turning down. So I start heading back towards the bar and the lights are coming back towards the bar with me. I will not head home because I do not feel comfortable with that. So if you are a female musician, be very careful with stuff like this because these people will follow you home. They will follow you wherever you go. And there's a lot of creeps out there. There's a lot of people that you just don't know what they're going to do. So be very cautious with all of that. I talk about all these crazy situations and everything about being a female in the music world, but there is some good. I always tell everybody, do not date a musician, do not date a biker. But I actually married somebody who used to hang out with all of my music friends. Now, he isn't a musician, but he was my drummer's best friend back in the day. And he used to come to all the gigs and help load. And he's a really good roadie. He's good at carrying everything in and out, and he still is to this day. It's been 20 years. So there is good situations to that for the people who like to hang out. So it's not always bad.
And coming up next, we have a few stories which are an excerpt from a Zoom conversation from this afternoon with my friend Peter Kelly, who you may remember from a previous episode. Now, Peter is a documentarian, a filmmaker, a video editor in Toronto, Canada. And one would think that in a rather not necessarily restricted or constrained environment like a studio, it's a safe place where you're doing one thing. One might think that you would be somewhat immune to such things as weirdness, or those, as I'm calling them now, blue moments in the arts community. But when you are commissioned to do work outside of the studio, a lot of things can change in a kind of unexpected way. And it's not, just like Linda just said, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes the unexpected is fresh, it's welcoming, it gives us new, creative, and especially professional perspective. Because the topic of this degeneracy as we've gone along, it's pretty pervasive, whether you work in performance or you work like far behind the scenes in the technical end of things, where you wouldn't think that you would have to come into contact with such things. But anyways, so welcome back, Peter Kelly, to the Creative Train podcast. Nice to have you back. What's been going on?
Oh, it's way too much. It's been, I'm gonna say, it's been a while since we've chatted.
Yeah.
Single biggest things, I did another 48-hour film challenge. It's 3 I've done in the last year and a half.
That's awesome.
I don't know why I keep doing it, but the team is getting better and better, so the end product is getting better and better.
So where do we see these? I remember you telling me that there was going to be a screening before the release or something like that before.
Yeah. So then the next one is Monday, May 25th. We're doing a screening at the Review Cinema in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tend to do the festival circuit. So I can't post them anywhere. The director takes them around.
Right.
But I'm excited enough that they're high enough quality that, they do the festival circuit.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
Which, 48-hour film festival, it's a real hodgepodge. Some stuff is not so good. Some stuff is phenomenal. But
basically
it's always
you
fun
have
to watch.
48 hours to script and film and edit and produce a movie.
Start to finish. They give you a couple things you have to include to kind of make sure that you don't do stuff ahead of time.
Right.
But really, I think the producer had a location lined up and the actors, and that was it. So they wrote, started at 7:30 on a Friday, and 7:28 this year, we had our final delivery in.
Wow. So I put out the question on social media because I had a little snicker when I realized the upcoming episode of the podcast was going to be number 69. And of course, my mind went there. And so I thought I would reach out to my fellow artists and creatives and creators and see what, stories they might have of a somewhat blue nature, if you know what I mean. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I know in music, as a performer and as a DJ, I've encountered a lot of really awkward situations with patrons. Advances on you and stuff like that. They assume things about you. What's your exposure to these kind of people? Or do you hear about it secondhand, or do you have to?
The creative community is not so far removed from the adult community.
The adult community meaning what?
Grown-ups? Pornography and say more mature content.
Yeah. I know. I just want to.
Yeah. I tend to be very clean cut, straight laced. My wife says, I should have been born in the 1950s. So this is not my world. But I mean, if you work on a film set, odds are somebody has shot something. Like the camera guys will take jobs. I know it's famous in LA for like high end DPs who, between gigs, they will shoot pornography. And then I mean, every wardrobe department always has stories about things that they've done for more risque clients
or lack thereof wardrobe.
So in my world, there's really 2 things that kind of stand out that hit me directly, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the first was after COVID lockdowns got lifted, I hadn't been too busy. I hadn't been bad. I was able to edit stuff during COVID, but then I had somebody reach out and they said, "Hi, you're in my phone as videographer," and they have no idea how I got into their phone. But their inquiry was basically, would I be open to filming a tickle video? And I'm like, what exactly is a tickle video? So I had a conversation with the woman, and it basically came down to she was a dominatrix. She had a studio that she rents out, and she had a client in another country who wanted to commission a tickle video, which involved a man with clothes on, although he did get down to just his shorts, being strapped or tied to a table and then tickled by two attractive women who were clothed. So it was one of those, like, it's definitely bordering on the adult world, and I was the person filming. It was an interesting experience because it was like, this is so far out of my realm.
Yeah.
But A, it was a paycheck, and B, they were completely professional about it. But it was it was an interesting experience. I've never been inside a dominatrix studio before. And one of the women had brought, I don't even know the term, I want to be respectful, I want to say her pet, which was a guy in a mask who just sat and watched. He didn't do anything inappropriate. He just sat and watched and didn't say anything, but he was clearly enjoying himself based on the head nods and the smiles I could see from him. But he literally was just there, I think, as like a submissive thing to watch, which I was not. One hand, wasn't prepared for that, but on the other hand, he wasn't in my way. So what did I do?
Right. So what did you do? Did you just set up like multiple cameras and microphones to get all the stuff, or do you?
That's it exactly. It was just like 2 cameras set up, a microphone, because they did talk to the guy. Oddly, what I found most interesting actually was talking to my client, the woman who was the dominatrix, and she explained it was an elderly man in another country who his wife had passed, and he was lonely, and he was exploring some stuff from his youth, and apparently had a very vivid memory of being in elementary school, and a girl he had a crush on pushed him over in the playground, sat on top of him, and tickled him. And some 70 years later, he decided he wanted to explore that.
Good for him. I mean, it's not. We don't have to understand or even really empathize with it. It's like, if that's what you want to do, man, that's great.
Yeah, and it was totally harmless. I mean, I got paid, the dominatrix got paid, the performers got paid, so like it was win-win.
It's interesting that you call it a dominatrix studio and not like a lair or.
Well, that's, I believe, how she had phrased. It's been years now.
Okay.
I believe that's how she's phrased it.
Interesting.
And it was funny because every so often I'm like, how did she get my phone number? And I had been commissioned at one point to make some videos for a guy who was launching an adult site. Mm-hmm. But his idea for his site was just like, it would be a forum for the adult community. And I only ended up filming one video for him. And it was just a conversation between, I had a hostess and a woman who ran an online sex toy store. So there was nothing tittillating about it. But it was literally, the conversation in that case was all about body positive stuff, because apparently the regulations for adult toys in the United States and in Canada is unacceptable. You can make a toy that's not body safe and sell it. And it's, made out of materials that really shouldn't be inside the human body. So, but legally you can, but there are lots of companies that, their whole thing is, we make toys that are completely safe. And I learned you have to do research before you buy any of this stuff.
Yeah, you can buy food that's not good for you. So that's no place in your body, but you can go to the store and buy it. It's interesting that you said, that they were, very professional, because at one point my mind went to asking, so did they expect you to join in at some point or ask you to join in? Because I think it's a topic that I touched on in the early part of the podcast that you'll hear, is that I think people assume that people in the performing arts and whatever, like you said, they're not too far from the pornography industry, that somehow there's a level of degeneracy among all of us.
Right. Yep. And I think that shows you the separation of worlds.
Yeah.
Like I've got a couple of friends in the finance world that we knew each other, from high school. And if I were to meet them today, I don't know that we'd be friends, solely based on they do not have any concept of what my life is like. They do not understand what being a creative is.
Right.
So I can see from that, if you're in that world, making assumptions about people who are on the creative side and where they may or may not end up.
Yeah, because I think they say, like a somewhat bohemian lifestyle or whatever, like a lot of open sexuality, partying and whatever, but that's not everybody. I mean, like, you said your wife said you might as well have been born in the 50s, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's the fact that I have stories, I think just kind of tells you that the crossover is everywhere. Amusingly, I was working with a buddy, co-producing some projects, and we were talking about getting a business together at one point. And there was a broadcaster located literally within 100 meters of his apartment, and the Canadian broadcaster. And I read an article about how they had been slapped on the wrist for not having met the Canadian content rules, specifically with their pornography. And apparently they had bought too much American porn and not commissioned enough Canadian porn. And I reached out to my buddy and I'm like, hey, business opportunity here. And it's so close to home. And he laughed it off as, do you want to end my marriage, Peter? So,
well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to get into the acting part of it, but I mean, like you said, it was a paycheck. A gig's a gig.
Yeah. I do have one other story.
Sure.
And this one blows my mind in that, I worked for a broadcaster. They had 3 channels, and one of the channels was comedy stuff. And one of the roles of me and my department was to cut content down. So when they bought a movie for broadcast, it had to fit within the broadcast window. So one of the things we'd have to do is go through and cut out a couple scenes or bits of dialogue. And occasionally we'd have to censor stuff. And I assigned a movie I had never seen to one of my editors, and it was Freddy Got Fingered, which is the Tom Green movie. And I didn't realize this, but the climax of the movie, if you will, involves him masturbating an elephant. And it needed to... Yeah, he masturbates an elephant onto his father. It's a very odd film, and I've not seen it. I've only seen scenes. But my editor came back and was like, Peter, I can't cut this scene. There's no way to make this family friendly given the content. Wow. And it can't be removed, because if you remove the scene, the end of the movie doesn't make sense. Like from the viewer's point of view, that scene needed to be there. I was like, give me the footage. So I ended up recutting, having not watched the movie, a scene where an elephant is masturbated to make it, I'm not going to say family friendly, but appropriate for the pre-watershed hour, as they called it, where there are some yeah, the watershed, after the watershed hour, this is when you can get away with more curse words or nudity.
Is that 11 p.m. or is that like a euphemism for a certain part of the movie?
No. It's as I did a lot of research. I ended up writing the censorship rules for this company, which again blows my mind, because I'm of the opinion, if you buy a movie or a TV show, air it as is. You bought it. That's what the filmmaker's vision was. Mm-hmm. But in learning about the censorship rules in Canada, the watershed hour is 9 p.m. for regular broadcast.
Okay.
So after 9, you can. This is where NYPD Blue at the time showed, I think, a woman's butt. And that was a big thing. They were going to show nudity, but it was on after 9 p.m. So it was fine.
Yeah.
The odd thing is, especially with the time change, and, I was doing this in like late 2000s, early 2010s. And their time shifting is a big thing that, where you could watch the 9 o'clock show that you watched every, Thursday at 9 o'clock would also air at 6 p.m. Depending on what part of the country you were in. So you could watch the Vancouver broadcast from Toronto, 3 hours off, which meant that people were watching stuff that was after 9 p.m. in Toronto, but it was 6 p.m. in Vancouver. And you're watching, Freddy Got Fingered with some inappropriate stuff. Legally, it was all in the up and up. The dominatrix was such a professional. Like, it would literally, There was
Yep.
none of that. There was
Yeah.
nothing like that. At one point, one of the female performers kind of like half flirted with me before the camera was rolling, very playfully.
Yeah.
And the woman who'd hired me turned and said, "Leave my videographer alone."
Let him do his job.
Yeah, she very clearly. It was all in good fun, but she made it clear where the boundary was.
Well, that's good. That's good. That is professional. I mean, you might not think of. I mean, most people might not think of a dominatrix as being professional, but they're getting paid for it, so they're professional.
Yep,
It's their
100%.
profession.
And I've again not having too much experience in that world. What little I have had, the people have all been professional and well behaved. I actually say more so than some people I've met in the quote unquote regular world.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, you have the clients that don't want to pay and
Yeah.
there's things like that. Or, they change scope creep is a big thing I have to deal with, where someone hires you to make X, but they want X plus Y plus Z, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And not, again, what little experience I have in that world, they very much draw the boundaries and like, this is what we're doing here today. This is exactly what's going to happen. And that's the plan that gets followed, and nothing unplanned happens.
That's great.
So that way there's everybody, again, my limited experience.
I think in some ways, I find from my perspective as a performer and whatever, I'm like hyper vigilant that way, to not ever let on anything about engaging with somebody personally that I'm just talking to or something.
Yeah.
No, not like, if a woman comes up to, and I've seen it, DJ start hitting on the guests, right? And, oh, you smell great and all this. And I'm like, oh, dude, why are you saying that? Come on. You got a wife and a kid at home, right?
Yeah. That's,
so it's just like, I'm just like, this is the song you want? Type in it. Good. Have a good night. See you later.
Yeah, you're super friendly, have your boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the weird thing as a creative. I think sometimes people misread passion, right? Where it's like passion for a project as opposed to like I actually ran some business networking events for a while, and one woman told me later that there was a guy who she was excited about a podcast she was starting, and he mistook her excitement that night for interest in him, and so it was like, this was a business situation, and this guy thought it was a dating opportunity.
Oh.
So I do understand that sometimes us creatives are misunderstood by the business world.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up here. We can talk after, but if you want to give your website a plug before we close off, so people can check it out, find out what you do.
So check out my stuff, peterkellymedia.com. I like to say I'm a video storyteller, and the stories I tend to tell are for businesses. So anybody needs their story told or to get their face out there in social media, please let me know.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming by, Peter. So I hope you learned a few things about people that work in the arts and the folks behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, and a little bit about what we're like as real human beings and not just the face in front of the microphone or the name scrolling by at the end of the credits. It's been a lot of fun reminiscing with a few people, some who didn't want to come on and tell their stories, and a few friends who were happy to come on and tell more than one story. Because I think it's not just about inspiring artists to keep going and to keep plugging and to find your creative niche. It's about understanding that as an artist, as a creator, as a creative, you're part of a world that needs you, but you're also part of a world that totally doesn't understand you. But even though they need you and they don't understand you, they want you in their life. So keep creating, keep inspired, and keep pushing. I've got your back.